learn about the box. You can bother me all you want, Kathy.
Committee will come to order. Chair recognizes herself for an opening statement. Good afternoon, everyone. This committee will mark up a host of legislation that will further unleash affordable, reliable American energy, lower healthcare costs, and expand access to treatments and services, improve consumer protections, strengthen our national security, and bolster our leadership amid threats from China. Energy and Commerce has a proud tradition of plowing the hard ground necessary to legislate and deliver results for the American people. As I look back on this year, I'm proud to note that we've passed solutions out of this committee like the Lower Energy Cost Act to restore America's energy independence and free us from being reliant on China. Broadband permitting reform, which will help more Americans, especially in rural communities, access reliable internet and participate in the modern economy. The Lower Cost, More Transparency Act to drive down healthcare costs. This has been a productive year for the committee, and I'm grateful for the time and hard work that has been put in by all the members and the staff. We have 44 bills ready for consideration today and tomorrow, and I appreciate everyone's attentiveness as we work through the list. As we head to the holiday season with hundreds of millions of Americans getting ready to visit loved ones, it is important to appreciate why that is possible. Abundant, reliable energy. We often take for granted the basic ability to heat our homes, fill up our gas tanks, or hop on a plane and travel across the nation in mere hours. Today's bills will further unlock American energy and make sure people have the opportunity for a better life and an affordable energy future. At the same time, I look around the room at all the incredible technology that was not available to our parents' generation. I also see massive safety improvements made to many because of the work that Congress has done over the years. Today, we will continue in that tradition as we work to strengthen our supply chains, promote American innovation and emerging technologies, and improve the safety and reliability of products and services Americans use every day. Finally, America has the unfortunate distinction of spending more on health care as a percentage of our economy than any other developed nation. And for our money, we've not become healthier. Instead, life expectancy in the United States is declining. Today, we will consider legislation that will expand access to care and fine-tune parts of our healthcare system to make a stronger and more sustainable system for patients. We will report out legislation that will make the American people healthier and better equipped to make healthcare decisions. Again, I want to thank everyone for their hard work in drafting these bills, finding offsets, and getting them ready for today. I look forward to moving them through this markup, bringing many to the House floor, and seeing as many of them as possible, and hopefully all of them, signed into law. Energy and Commerce will continue leading the way on delivering results for the American people. And with that, I yield back. I now recognize gentleman from New Jersey, Representative Pallone, for 5 minutes for an opening statement.
I thank the chair. Today we are marking up 44 bills in full committee. We'll mark up 7 energy bills, including a package of bipartisan nuclear bills that is being led by Energy Subcommittee Ranking Member DeGette and Chairman Duncan. The package is comprised of 11 nuclear energy bills we moved through the Energy Subcommittee in October. It will make it easier for the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to process an anticipated wave of forthcoming applications for new advanced reactor designs over the next decade. We'll also move Representative Latta's bipartisan legislation, establishing a program at the Department of Energy to build out domestic nuclear fuel cycle capabilities. Unfortunately, that's where the bipartisanship ends in the energy area. Republicans putting forth 4 partisan bills on energy efficiency and grid reliability, and these bills are designed to limit DOE's ability to issue energy efficiency standards that help lower energy bills for American families and reduce emissions. Gutting energy efficiency standards undermines our efforts to combat the worsening climate crisis. But we'll also consider Chair Rogers' Hydropower bill. At the subcommittee markup, I voiced my concerns with this bill. Since that time, the Republican majority has engaged in good faith negotiations, but there are still several unresolved issues that make it difficult for me to support this bill. If the majority wants a broad bipartisan bill, we need more time to work out these issues. I'm pleased that we're also considering several bills marked up by the Innovation, Data, and Commerce Subcommittee, championed by Democratic members that empower consumers, strengthen our economy, and save lives. Unfortunately, there is one bill from that subcommittee, the Advancing Gig Economy Act, where we could not reach bipartisan agreement, and I'll have more to say about that bill when it's called up. Turning to health care, we'll consider several bipartisan bills that address the critical needs of both Medicare patients and providers and lower costs for patients. Some of the bills before us today will extend critical programs to provide payment stability for doctors and ensure patients can receive quality care, all while lowering health care costs for Medicare beneficiaries. We're also considering a number of bills that will improve the transparency of CMS's pathways to coverage for new technologies and treatments in the Medicare program and Medicare Advantage program plan benefits. And I appreciate my Republican colleagues' willingness to make changes to several bills to address Democratic concerns and ensure we don't hinder CMS's ability to prioritize the health and safety of Medicare beneficiaries. I'm also pleased that we're considering a number of bipartisan policies to rein in the practices of pharmacy benefit managers. We're doing this by increasing transparency in Medicare Part D, while also ensuring PBMs are truly providing a service to Part D plans and not retaining savings that could be used to lower costs for seniors. I'll say that some of these policies, in particular H.R. 4881, need a substantial amount of additional work before they'll be ready for floor consideration. But I'm willing to move forward today with a commitment from Chair Rogers that will not go to the floor without working out the remaining technical and implementation issues. I'm also glad we found a bipartisan path forward on H.R. 2365, the National Plan to End Parkinson's Act. Prior to today's markup, Republicans were planning on making changes that, in my view, would have watered down the bill and undermined the bill's language, ensuring that the Advisory Council on Parkinson Research was representative and inclusive. But I'm glad that we found a path forward, and Republicans have accepted language that will actually strengthen the bill and ensure that minority communities and communities underrepresented in Parkinson's research are represented on the Advisory Council. And finally, I'm happy we'll be considering the Cutting Copays Act, which will deliver savings for beneficiaries while encouraging the use of generic drugs. And while I look forward to advancing most of these bills, there are a few bills I cannot support. I oppose any policies that will result in increases in out-of-pocket costs for Medicare beneficiaries, as well as policies that CMS simply cannot implement. And I'll have more to say on some of these bills as we move on. But for now, I thank the chair for all the cooperation on both sides of the aisle, and I yield back the balance of my time, Madam Chair.
Gentleman yields back. The chair calls up H.R. 5677 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 5677, a bill to authorize the Federal Communications Commission to process applications for spectrum licenses.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point, so ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized? Gentleman from Ohio, the chairman of the subcommittee, Mr. Ladd, is recognized for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. Move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized.
I am very pleased that we are considering the 5G Sale Act today. While I'm disappointed the United States has been operating without spectrum auction authority for over a year, it is vital that companies that won auctions before the authority expired are issued their licenses without further delay. Now is a critical time to restore trust in our nation's auction process, and this is a good step in that direction. And I really want to thank the gentleman from Pennsylvania for leading this important bill, and I urge my colleagues to support it. And Madam Chair, before I yield back, if I could just raise a brief point of personal privilege. I'd like to thank a member of our Communications and Technology Subcommittee, Evan View, for his nearly 7 years of service to the Energy and Commerce Committee. Evan started as a staff assistant on the committee and worked his way up to professional staff, becoming the wireless policy expert for the majority staff. He's one of the hardest working, strategic, and smart minds in the communication issues, especially spectrum policy, and I have truly enjoyed working with him. In the new year, Evan will be leaving Congress to pursue a new opportunity, will be sorely missed, and I tell you, we can't thank you enough for your service to the committee and to the American people, and we're going to miss you. And I yield back. Thank you, Madam Chair.
We're going to miss you, Evan. Thank you.
Madam Chair?
Yes, yes. Chair recognizes, or for what purpose does Ms. Eshu seek recognition?
To strike the last word, Madam Chairwoman,
You're recognized for 5 minutes.
on the issue. Thank you. Spectrum, and I've said this so many times, spectrum is America's gold in the 21st century. Nothing moves without it. And it's been 271 days since the FCC's auction authority has expired. Many of my colleagues have heard me railing about this, because the expiration of auction authority didn't just stop the FCC from conducting new auctions, it also prevented the commission from finishing the work on auctions already conducted. American companies that bid in an auction and win, and they did, have not been issued their licenses despite having paid hundreds of millions of dollars for them. And this is just unacceptable. So I'm very glad we're marking up this bill to give the FCC the authority to issue the licenses already won. But also, what's clear is that this is not a long-term solution, but I'm very glad we're doing this. The FCC needs its auction authority restored as soon as possible because U.S. leadership is really at stake in this. Our leadership in innovation and telecommunications policy shouldn't and can't continue while it's unable to properly administer its spectrum. So with that, Madam Chairwoman, I yield back, and I'm really very glad that we're taking this step. It's a very important one.
Gentlelady yields back.
Madam Speaker,
Does anyone, Mr. Joyce, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
I wish to be recognized to speak in support of my bill.
You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Chair Rogers. I appreciate the opportunity to speak on behalf of my bill, H.R. 5677, or the 5G SALE Act. This bipartisan bill will grant the FCC temporary authority to issue over 7,500 licenses that have been stalled while Spectrum Auction Authority has lapsed. It has been more than a year since the Auction 108 was conducted by the FCC for these 2.5 gigahertz band licenses, and where more than $400 million was raised by 63 bidders. Just last week, in the Communications and Technology Subcommittee, FCC Chair Rosenworcel stated that she would devote the necessary resources and time to make sure that these licenses would be issued as quickly as possible. My bill is a common-sense solution to a problem that is specifically keeping rural Americans from better 5G access. I urge all of my colleagues to vote in favor of my bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Further discussion. Chair, for what purpose does the gentlelady seek recognition? Ms. Catt?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to strike the last word.
You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Earlier this year, Congress allowed the FCC's auction authority to lapse for the first time in history. While this committee has made every effort to restore this authority, the Senate continues to hold up progress, and the effects of this inaction are already being felt by communities across the country. In my district in New Hampshire, there are over 50 individual 2.5 gigahertz cell sites currently sitting inactive because the FCC no longer has the authority to grant the licenses needed to turn them on. These sites are already built and ready to provide broadband service to over 130,000 of my constituents, many in rural and unserved or underserved areas. Broadband service is too vital to force communities to wait, and this 2.5 spectrum will improve service to over 50 million Americans nationwide. The 5G SALE Act before us today grants the FCC the authority needed to complete the processing of the licenses awarded in the last auction prior to auction authority expired earlier this year. This will allow providers to turn on these cell sites and start providing broadband access to communities almost immediately. This bill has passed unanimously in the Senate. I look forward to seeing it advance in the House. I want to thank my colleague, Representative Joyce, for introducing the bill. I'm proud to co-sponsor it. I urge my colleagues to support its passage. Thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Further discussion on the bill? Seeing none, The question now occurs on approving H.R. 5677, and a roll call vote has been requested. Clerk will call the roll.
Burgess. Burgess votes aye. Latta. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson. Johnson votes aye. Bouchon. Bouchon votes aye. Hudson. Hudson votes aye. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Dunn. Curtis. Curtis votes aye. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Armstrong. Armstrong votes aye. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Miller Meeks. Kamick. Kamick votes aye. Obernolte. Pallone.
Aye.
Pallone votes aye. Eschew. Eschew votes aye. Deget. Deget votes aye. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes aye. Matsui. Matsui votes aye. Castor. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Clark. Clark votes aye. Cardenas. Cardenas votes aye. Ruiz. Peters. Peters votes aye. Dingell. Dingell votes aye. Vesey. Vesey votes aye. Custer.
Aye.
Custer votes aye. Kelly. Kelly votes aye. Barragan. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes aye. Soto. Soto votes aye. Craig. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Trahan votes aye. Fletcher. Rogers.
Aye.
Rogers votes aye.
Madam Clerk, how is Mr. Latta recorded?
Mr. Latta is not recorded. Mr. Latta votes aye.
How is Ms. Harshberger recorded?
Harshbarger is not recorded. Harshbarger votes aye.
How is Mr. Allen recorded?
Mr. Allen is not recorded. Allen votes aye.
Any other? How is Ms. Craig reported?
Craig is not recorded. Craig votes aye.
How is Mr. Crenshaw recorded?
Mr. Crenshaw is not recorded. Crenshaw votes aye.
Clerk will report. Madam Clerk, how is Mr. Ruiz recorded?
Mr. Ruiz is not recorded. Mr. Ruiz votes aye.
How is Mr. Sarbanes recorded?
Sarbanes is not recorded. Sarbanes votes aye.
How is Mr. Obernolte recorded?
Mr. Obernolte is not recorded. Obernolte votes aye.
Clerk will report.
Chair Rogers, on that vote, there were 46 ayes and 0 noes.
The ayes have it, and the bill is adopted. Chair calls up H.R. 6544 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 6544, a bill to advance the benefits of nuclear energy by enabling efficient,
Without objection,
timely...
the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. The bill will be open for amendment at any point, so ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill? Mr. Duncan is recognized for 5 minutes to strike the last word.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to strike the last word and speak in support of my bill, H.R. 6544, the Atomic Energy Advancement Act. I want to thank my colleague, friend, and ranking member of the Energy, Climate, and Grid Security Subcommittee for leading this effort with me, Congresswoman Diana DeGette. This package of nuclear bills is comprised of the work of many members of this committee on both sides of the aisle, And I want to thank my colleagues for, for their work in advancing the use of nuclear energy here in the United States. The Atomic Energy Advancement Act and the policies and provisions in the bill were generated from a bipartisan committee process. Our goal is to advance durable, bipartisan policy that will expand nuclear energy and its many benefits for the nation. Chair Rogers, Ranking Members Pallone and DeGette, and I began this process in April when we sent a request for information to stakeholders in the industry. We built on the responses we received through a series of hearings where we heard from the NRC commissioners, from the DOE, and the labs, and from industry experts on what is required to modernize the NRC to advance the peaceful use of nuclear power. From these hearings and a markup last month in subcommittee, we developed the legislation in front of us to update relevant laws and policies that will enable the full promise of nuclear energy while maintaining the NRC's global gold standard for safety. Our goal here is to bring America's nuclear promise back into alignment with the goals that Congress established when we ushered in the age of the peaceful use of the atom, an age that has shown American leadership around the world and the amazing benefits of nuclear power. This is exemplified in a provision I worked on in this packet, the NRC Mission Alignment Act. This directs the NRC to update its mission statement to include that its licensing regulation of nuclear energy activities will be conducted in a manner that is efficient and does not unnecessarily limit the potential of nuclear energy to improve the general welfare and benefits of nuclear technology for society. The Atomic Energy Act of 1954 established a national policy that the use of civilian nuclear energy shall be directed to make the maximum contribution to the general stakeholders to ensure the NRC is conducting an important safety mission, its important safety mission, of the broad goals of the Atomic Energy Act. As NRC Chairman Hansen said himself, NRC must do its best not to be an impediment to innovation and deploy these nuclear export reviews, and it extends the critical liability protections necessary because this has been truly a team effort. Suffice to say, I'm extremely proud of this bipartisan effort. Now more than ever, America must continue to lead, especially as our adversaries actively work to undercut our strength. Russia and China are seeking to dominate the nuclear markets and supply chains for these technologies. The Atomic Energy Act has been the foundation, the Atomic Energy Act has been a foundation of our nuclear leadership for almost 70 years. Its ideals have been the bedrock of American nuclear leadership, and the policies we are marking up today build on this foundation to reflect advancements in technologies. America can and must continue to set global nuclear standards, and the Atomic Energy Advancement Act will ensure that we do. There is more we will do. There were legislative proposals we could not yet get the bipartisan agreement on. For example, legislation eliminating mandatory hearings. We plan on returning to those as we continue our work in the nuclear space.
We always want more.
There should be no question. This is a strong start that we should all be proud of. It's indicative of the Energy and Commerce Committee and its members who are willing to roll up their sleeves, do the hard work on critical issues like nuclear energy, and I look forward to a strong yes vote on this important legislation. I thank my colleagues once again for all their work and dedication to this effort, and with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the lady from Colorado, Ms. DeGette, for 5 minutes to strike the last word.
Thank the chair. I just want to thank Chairman Duncan for working with us on this great bipartisan package. If you would have asked me 10 years ago, would I be co-sponsoring a wide-ranging suite of nuclear bills, I would have looked in shock and disbelief. But in fact, what this package shows is when this committee, the best committee in this House, decides to go by regular order and work together, we can actually do things that we can all agree with. This package is stronger than the bills we had a legislative hearing on back in July, and that's because after July, our staff sat down really hard and worked together. They listened to feedback from all corners, and they hashed out a deal. I just want to talk for a minute about my bill, the one Democratic bill that's included in this package, the Strengthening the NRC Workforce Act. That bill will strengthen the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's ability to attract and retain highly qualified and competent employees, ensuring that the commission is up to the challenge of licensing the advanced reactors that we hope will apply in great numbers over the next decade. The bill, we hope, will help reverse a worrying trend of brain drain at the NRC Last year, the agency reported it was 23% smaller than it was 6 years prior. Now, I'm all for efficiency in government, but the NRC's workload is going to increase sizably over the next few years, so we need to give the agency the tools it needs now to make sure it can do its job in the future. The version of my bill included in the package also includes a number of additions negotiated with our majority after the subcommittee markup. And the package also includes proposals, I'm so pleased to say, that were co-led by Representatives Peters, Tonko, and Schreier to ease the licensing burden on advanced reactors while not compromising the vital safety and environmental safeguards at the NRC. Also are included are creative ideas to make it easier to site reactors at brownfield sites, something I strongly support. I also mentioned that we had expressed concern over, especially regarding the NRC's mission and ensuring that efforts to increase the efficiency of the NRC's oversight program doesn't harm the on-site inspection program. While I don't think that any of us would call the resulting compromises perfect or ideal, that's exactly why it's called compromise, and we can live with it. Now, the Senate has passed its own version of NRC licensing reform. This bill includes many of the same ideas and principles as our package does today. And so I hope, because of bipartisan effort on this bill, that we can get this on the House floor soon and pass it. And something many members of this committee have never seen or done, a conference committee to hash, I know, it's a shock, Mr. Cardenas, but we could have a conference committee to think about this, to work it out, and to move our nuclear energy forward. One last thing. As we do this, we still have to tackle the important job of what do we do with the waste. And I'm going to say that every single time until we think of this, because it's going to be part of the overall program. And with that, Madam Chair, thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Does anyone else seek recognition on the bill? Chair recognizes Mr. Bouchon.
Yep, I'll be brief, Madam Chair.
5 minutes, and
I'm speaking.
strike the last word.
Yep, I'm speaking in support of the Atomic Energy Advancement Act. This package builds on previous work driven by this committee's efforts to advance nuclear energy for the security and reliability of future American energy. Section 111 of this bill contains legislation which I am proud to have led with my colleague, Representative Peters. In short, our component of this bill would reduce the hourly rate of fees assessed and collected by the Nuclear Regulatory Commission from applicants for pre-application activities for advanced nuclear reactor licenses, ensuring that what these companies are charged only reflects mission direct costs for the service of reviewing the licenses. What this means in practice is that advanced reactor applicants could pay less than half the current $300 an hour rate for licensing, dramatically reducing their cost by focusing just on paying for the actual license review work. I urge my colleagues to support the Atomic Energy Advancement Act, and I will yield unless someone wants my time.
Thank you. I appreciate the gentleman for yielding, and I have the privilege of representing three great Western Kentucky coal counties, Muhlenberg, McLean, and Ohio counties. And unfortunately, due to the regulations implemented during the Obama administration, we've had loss of critical jobs and high-paying jobs in the coal communities. And I have a provision in this bill that is H.R. 6268, the Nuclear for Brownsfield Site Preparation Act, that looks at a study to see what type of financing is available or permits required and so forth at existing coal sites for nuclear power plants. These are energy workers. They know how to do a good job in the energy field. I'm committed to making sure we have affordable, reliable energy from diverse energy portfolio, but empowering communities who've powered our nation for years. And I appreciate the opportunity and Chairman Duncan for putting this into the bill today, and I will yield back to my friend from Indiana.
The gentleman yields back, and I now yield to Mr. Hudson from North Carolina.
Thank the gentleman for yielding, and thank you, Madam Chair. This past weekend was the one-year anniversary of the Moore County grid attack. In the middle of a winter cold spell, our grid was taken out. I was concerned about my 45,000 neighbors who went without power to their homes. the patients who relied on generators to power medical devices, and the small businesses who were forced to close in the midst of holiday shopping. I want to thank Chairwoman Rogers, Ranking Member Pallone, Chairman Duncan, Ranking Member DeGette, and the entire committee for their continued commitment to increase grid security and unlock reliable, clean American energy production. Including my legislation, the Advanced Nuclear Deployment Act and this Atomic Energy Advancement Act will prioritize reducing barriers to entry for commercial developers of advanced nuclear reactor technology, provide regulatory certainty, and reduce bureaucratic red tape with applications for advanced nuclear reactor development, implementation, and demonstration. If we want to remain competitive against our foreign adversaries, we must construct new energy capacity resources like advanced nuclear reactors. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. In doing so, we will increase domestic energy production, strengthen our security posture, and lower energy costs, all while reducing our country's carbon footprint. And with that, I'll be happy to yield back to the gentleman.
The gentleman yields back to me, and I'll yield to Mr. Johnson from Ohio for the last minute, 34 seconds.
Well, thank you. Thank you to my colleague for yielding. First of all, this legislation, the Atomic Energy Advancement Act, is a bipartisan product. We would not have been able to bring to this markup without the work of our great committee staff. I know you all have put a lot of work into this, and you deserve recognition for your work. In my view, this is a culmination of years of efforts to bring meaningful reforms to the American civilian nuclear sector at just the right time. As I mentioned in the Energy Subcommittee markup just a few weeks ago, and the hearings we've held this year, innovations in nuclear technology are advancing rapidly, and it is imperative that regulators and policymakers are ready. My legislation, the Strengthening American Nuclear Competitiveness Act, is part of H.R. 6544. It has a number of important provisions, including reports from the NRC on new innovative uses of advanced nuclear and nuclear manufacturing, reforms to help American nuclear entrepreneurs export their technology across the globe, and also provide much-needed Price-Anderson protections that are essential to providing nuclear power for generations to come. Friends, this is the way forward. America must remain the leader at the head of the table for civilian nuclear power. It's resilient, reliable, and not to mention carbon emission-free. It's been a great pleasure to work on these issues over the years with many of you here, and I do look forward to what our innovators, including many in Ohio, can do if we get this right. I urge my colleagues to support this measure, and let's get this to the President's desk. Thank you, and I yield back to the gentleman from Indiana.
Madam Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Further discussion? Chair recognizes gentleman from California, Mr. Peters, for 5 minutes.
Madam Chair, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized.
Madam Chair, I want to thank the sponsors of this legislation for bringing forth a bipartisan bill that advances common sense policies to bolster nuclear energy, the largest source of zero carbon electricity in the United States. In particular, I want to thank the sponsors for including two measures I co-lead with my Republican counterparts. The first, H.R. 995, the Global Nuclear Energy Assessment and Cooperation Act, which I joined with Representative Carter, bolsters our nuclear energy sector while inhibiting our adversaries' nuclear capabilities, including those of China and Russia. Specifically, the bill promotes better international cooperation and assistance related to nuclear reactors, helps build nuclear regulatory organizations or legal frameworks in other nations, and builds up the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's international efforts by facilitating the issuing of licenses to import or export nuclear reactors. This bill will help continue our clean energy leadership and ensure that we, the United States, remain the world's leading developer of nuclear energy. The second bill, H.R. 6326, the Advanced Reactor Fee Reduction Act, which I co-lead with Representative Bouchon, advances the future of American nuclear energy and removes regulatory barriers for investment in advanced nuclear reactor technologies. Nuclear energy is and will continue to be essential to a clean, resilient, and reliable electric grid. I appreciate the work for everyone. Urge a yes vote and yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the gentleman from Georgia for 5 minutes in support of the bill.
Move to strike the last word, Madam Chair.
Gentleman's recognized.
Madam Chair, America used to be the leader in nuclear energy. It should be one of the key parts of our energy security in the awe of the globe. However, we've allowed it to deteriorate and for other countries to take the lead on the global stage. Instead, Russia and China are building larger and larger presence in global nuclear power. Together, the two account for nearly 70% of reactors under construction are being planned worldwide. Russia has the most with 19 and has a strong influence in the global nuclear power. Russia is building plants in Turkey and Egypt and discussing one in Hungary. China is pursuing projects in Pakistan. Argentina is in talks with Saudi Arabia, among many others. Chinese nuclear energy officials have said that China could build as many as 30 nuclear reactors abroad worth $145.5 billion by 2030. The United States cannot stand by and allow China and Russia to be the standard bearers of nuclear energy. Just imagine the nuclear non-proliferation implications, let alone the economic ones. Don't be fooled. These are just another way for China and Russia to exert influence and manipulate countries around the globe. We've seen it with the Belt and Road Initiative, and with nuclear plants, this means for decades and decades of developing countries tied to China. Thankfully, this doesn't have to be the case. We have a new American nuclear renaissance, and this bill, the Atomic Energy Advancement Act, will provide important steps to do so. This bill includes reforms in the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to increase licensing efficiency, strengthen our nuclear workforce, make advanced nuclear technology more accessible through fee reductions, modernize reviews, and other important improvements to how nuclear is approached in the U.S. I'm pleased to have my bill, the Global Nuclear Energy Assessment and Cooperation, which I introduced along with Representative Scott Peters from California, included as a section of this bill. This bill will take a multi-pronged approach to promoting nuclear energy around the globe. First, it provides for a global nuclear energy assessment, so we have a full picture of the state of nuclear energy around the world and how the U.S. should be working with other countries to promote nuclear energy. Second, it'll provide a program for training and the sharing of expertise. Further, it will provide for an international nuclear reactor export and innovation branch at the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to focus our international nuclear efforts, including training and sharing expertise with our allies. This will inspire coordination, research, and development for the U.S. and our allies so we can create a safe and secure world. Lastly, it will prohibit the import of nuclear fuel assemblies from hostile foreign nations, including Russia and China. This will encourage energy independence and prevent our country from becoming reliant on our enemies for our nuclear energy needs. My hope is that my bill will be just one small part of improving the global competition for nuclear energy. This is how we begin to secure a safe, reliable energy future for the United States of America and democracies across the globe. And I yield back.
Would the gentleman yield?
I'll yield to the gentleman from Pennsylvania.
Thank you to Chairman Duncan and Representative Dingell and all the other members of the committee whose efforts went into creating this important piece of legislation. America's first civilian nuclear power plant was built not too far from my district in Shippingport, Pennsylvania, and ever since then, nuclear power has been a critical part in our Commonwealth's energy portfolio. Not only is nuclear power a large portion of our baseload power, but companies like Westinghouse are working to develop and build new generations and sizes of nuclear reactors. This bill is a step in the right direction to make sure nuclear power stays a key resource and the industry can develop and innovate into the future. This bill's legislative achievements include streamlining the Nuclear Regulatory Commission's mission to ensure regulatory activities are being done efficiently and in a way that won't limit the ability of nuclear power to benefit society. As we look to the future of our nation's energy supply and America continues to lead the way in responsibly reducing emissions, nuclear power can provide stable and consistent energy to our electric grid. This legislation is a critical step to ensuring nuclear power can be used to ensure that baseload power is accessible for homes, hospitals, and manufacturers across the United States. Thank you, and I yield back to the gentleman from Georgia.
Anyone else? Madam Chair, I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Further discussion. Chair, for what purpose does the lady from Illinois seek recognition?
I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
My intention is to vote against this legislation, and here's why. This bill props up the nuclear industry and all of the not yet licensed advanced nuclear reactors, and absolutely does nothing for any of the other zero emissions technologies that are available and are coming to fruition right now. The bill, in addition, extends Price-Anderson protections against liability for the domestic use of nuclear power for the next 20 years through 2045. All liability is protected. And the bill promotes the use of, while it promotes the use of nuclear power, it does nothing to address the issue of waste storage or improvement of plant security, which I think is so important in many communities. So it seems to me, from also talking to many of the environmental groups, that if we're going to make an investment, this is the time for us to make investments, yes, in clean energy, in not having more fossil fuels, but we have so many other opportunities that we know are safe, don't raise all kinds of other safety issues, and I think that's ought to be the priority. And that's the way the private sector has been moving right now, rather than supporting the advancement of nuclear energy. And with that, I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Further discussion. Chair recognizes, or for what purpose does Ms. Lesko seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to strike the last word.
Ladies recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm pleased to support H.R. 6544, Atomic Energy Advancement Act. It includes one of my bills. Section 123 requires the Nuclear Regulatory Commission to assess and implement improvements to its oversight and inspection practices. I believe every government agency can and must become more efficient and update their practices. I am glad to have worked with committee staff and our colleagues across the aisle to make small changes in the original text to address their concerns to make this section bipartisan. And with that, I ask my colleagues to vote yes, and I yield back. Yes, I will yield.
I do feel obligated to mention the United States has an incredible track record of safety with the nuclear navy, and we often forget that. We forget it at our own peril. If we truly are going to move to a net zero or carbon zero future in 2050, we can't do it by turning up the lights and turning down the power for every other home in the United States. We do have the ability, we do have the technology, we do have the know-how, because we've done it. We did it with the nuclear navy back in the 1950s and 60s. That technology should be explored and extrapolated, and to simply close the door on that, as the gentlelady from Illinois is suggesting, is short-sighted and wrong, and I yield back.
And I yield back my time.
Further, is there any further, does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill? Further discussion? Chair recognizes gentleman from Georgia for 5 minutes.
Madam Chairwoman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized.
Madam Chairwoman, I move to speak in favor of the Atomic Energy Advancement Act. And all of the above strategy is critical to reclaiming American energy dominance, which is critical. And as the nation's largest source of clean energy, nuclear has a pivotal role to play. With the first 2 nuclear reactors built in over 3 decades in the United States, located at Plant Vogtle in my district, and we are leading our nation's nuclear future. As we saw through the construction process, nuclear projects in the U.S. are often bogged down by burdensome licensing and permitting processes that result in unnecessary delays and cost overruns. I compliment Southern Company for their persistence in the completion of these projects. They persevered through them with many challenges. That is why I'm proud to have my bill, the Nuclear Licensing Efficiency Act, incorporated in the Atomic Energy Advancement Act. This bill seeks to modernize the inefficient procedures that hamper our nuclear energy expansion. Specifically, the Nuclear License Efficiency Act provides efficient, timely, and predictable reviews of applications and proceedings for licenses of nuclear reactors. It allows information that was used in the licensing process for an existing nuclear reactor site to be used in further licensing and permitting at that site. And it establishes a time frame of once every 3 years to update performance metrics and milestone schedules to be the most efficient possible. It is imperative we incorporate best practices learned from this huge accomplishment at Plant Vogtle so we can further incorporate 24/7 nuclear energy into our grid. I am proud to have my bill as part of the broader bipartisan Atomic Energy Advancement Act to improve our nuclear energy regulatory process. I urge my colleagues to support the Atomic Energy Advancement Act, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Further discussion? Seeing none, question occurs on approving H.R. 6544. Oh, further discussion. Oh, an amendment. Oh, there's that. Okay. For what purpose does the gentlelady from Massachusetts seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report
labeled
the amendment.
Trahan 41.
Amendment to H.R. 6544, offered by Ms. Trahan of Massachusetts. At the end of Section 102, add the following subsection. Fusion machines. Definition.
Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with. Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes in support of her amendment.
Madam Chair, earlier this year, the Nuclear Regulatory Committee took an important vote to regulate commercial fusion energy under its existing regulatory framework, specifically the byproduct materials framework. This was a critical step to unlocking commercialized fusion energy because the Commission recognized that fusion does not need to be regulated the same way as fission. This bipartisan amendment, which I'm introducing with my friend and fellow Fusion Caucus co-chair, Mr. Obernolte, will in effect codify the vote that the NRC took. This will provide the fusion industry the regulatory certainty that it needs to continue pursuing their innovative research and development and foster an entire fusion industry right here in the United States. We know that fusion is a game changer. A future with fusion means thousands of good-paying, family-sustaining clean energy jobs that will create along the way. Fusion unlocks a future where energy production is no longer tied to access to a resource, and it means an endless supply of baseload clean energy without any emissions. And it also means that dictators like Putin won't be able to manipulate energy markets to suit their needs. But make no mistake, both our allies and our adversaries are racing to unlock fusion energy. The UK is investing £650 million. Germany just announced a $1 billion euro investment. China has already invested $1.8 billion in their state-owned facilities with plans to massively ramp up over the next decade. In China, there's no private industry investment in fusion. It's all government-controlled, and that's a huge competitive advantage that we have over them. What the United States does best is innovate. For example, one of those companies is Commonwealth Fusion Systems, which is located in the district I represent. Since its founding roughly 5 years ago, CFS has raised more than $2 billion in private investment, employs over 600 people, and is well on its way to building Spark, a fusion machine that will achieve net energy and demonstrate that producing commercial fusion energy is just a few years is possible. But if we're going to continue to beat China to fusion, then it's absolutely critical that we provide the commercial fusion industry with the regulatory certainty that it needs. That is what this bipartisan amendment will achieve. I urge my colleagues to join me and Mr. Obernolte in supporting this important common sense proposal that is critical to unlocking fusion energy. And with that, I'd like to yield to my friend and co-chair of the Fusion Caucus, Mr. Obernolte.
I thank the gentlewoman from yielding, and I thank her for co-leading this bipartisan piece of this amendment with me as co-chairs of the Fusion Energy Caucus. We are very well aware of the revolutionary changes that fusion energy will make in the American market for energy. Fusion energy has the potential to completely revolutionize the production of energy. It will be by far the cleanest energy that mankind has ever managed to produce. It will also generate energy in a way that avoids almost all of the environmental drawbacks of traditional nuclear energy. However, the Atomic Energy Act, under which traditional fission energy is governed currently does not even mention fusion energy. That's understandable because it was passed in 1954 when fusion energy was not even envisioned. However, this is creating substantial problems with the development of fusion energy because of the substantial investment that needs to be made to bring this revolutionary technology to market. So this amendment will solve that problem. It will establish some regulatory certainty for the companies that are striving to bring this energy to market in the United States. It's very timely and I think a very needed piece of legislation. I'd like to again thank my colleague and the co-chair of the Fusion Energy Caucus, Congresswoman Trahan, for offering this amendment with me and urge its adoption by the members of this committee. I yield back.
Oh, I'd like to thank the gentleman and the chair, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Further discussion on the amendment? If there's no further discussion, the vote occurs on the amendment. All those in favor shall signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, nay. Ayes have it. The amendment is agreed to. Are there further amendments? Seeing none. Question now occurs on approving H.R. 6544 as amended, and a roll call vote has been requested. Clerk will call the roll.
Burgess. Burgess votes aye. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson.
Aye.
Johnson votes aye. Bouchon.
Aye.
Bouchon votes aye. Hudson. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Carter votes aye. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Dunn. Curtis. Curtis votes aye. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Crenshaw votes aye. Armstrong. Armstrong votes aye. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes aye. Miller Meeks. Miller Meeks votes aye. Kamick. Kamick votes aye. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone.
Aye.
Pallone votes aye. Eschew. Eschew votes aye. Deget. Deget votes aye. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes no. Matsui. Matsui votes aye. Castor. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes. Sarbanes votes aye. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Clark. Clark votes aye. Cardenas. Cardenas votes aye. Ruiz. Ruiz votes aye. Peters. Peters votes aye. Dingell. Dingell votes aye. VC. VC votes aye. Custer. Custer votes aye. Kelly. Kelly votes aye. Barragan. Barragan votes no. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes aye. Soto. Soto votes aye. Craig. Craig votes aye. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Trahan votes aye. Fletcher. Rogers.
Aye.
Rogers votes aye.
Madam Clerk, how is Mr. Hudson recorded?
Mr. Hudson is not recorded.
Aye.
Mr. Hudson votes aye.
Yeah. H 65.
Clerk will report.
Chair Rogers, on that vote, there were 47 ayes and 2 noes.
The ayes have it. The bill is adopted. Chair calls up H.R. 5718 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 5718, a bill to require the Secretary of Energy to
Without
establish...
objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. Bill will be open for amendment at any point so ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill? For what purpose does gentleman Mr. Latta seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Move to strike the last word.
Recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. For too long, the United States has neglected to invest in its domestic nuclear industry. Instead of leading the world in nuclear innovation, we have grown too reliant on foreign nations like Russia for our nuclear fuels. This is especially true when it comes to the high-assay, low-enriched uranium, HALEU, which is required to fuel the advanced nuclear reactors that are under development by American inventors. This is a threat to our energy security and our national security. If we're going to continue to grow our economy while also trying to reduce carbon emissions, then we need to rebuild our nuclear fuel supply chain. It is critical that we take action to reinvest in our domestic nuclear energy capabilities, and it begins with shoring up our domestic uranium mining production, enrichment, and conversion capacity. The Nuclear Fuel Security Act will put us back on the right path. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation, and Madam Chair, I yield back the balance of my time.
Gentleman yields back. Chair recognizes the ranking member, Mr. Pallone, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm glad to see the Nuclear Fuel Security Act on our agenda today. Right now, there are only 2 uranium enrichment facilities operating in the United States, and they can only support roughly 1/3 of our civilian nuclear fleet's enriched uranium needs. There's only a single uranium conversion facility operating in the U.S., meaning we have to import the vast majority of the uranium that we can enrich. So simply put, right now, we lack the vital infrastructure to ban all Russian uranium imports overnight without doing damage to our nation's nuclear industry. So this bill would create programs within the Department of Energy to ensure the supply of low-enriched uranium that our current reactors need, and the supply of the high-assay, low-enriched uranium that our future reactors will need. So this bill is vital to U.S. energy security, and I urge members of the committee to support it. And I'm glad that the bill looks to have a path forward to make it into law soon. So thank you again, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Further discussion? Seeing none, the vote occurs on approving H.R. 5718, and a roll call has been requested. Clerk will call the roll.
Burgess. Latta.
Aye.
Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Aye. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Aye. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Johnson.
Aye.
Johnson votes aye. Bouchon.
Aye.
Bouchon votes aye. Hudson.
Aye.
Hudson votes aye. Wahlberg. Carter. Duncan. Palmer. Dunn. Curtis. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw.
Aye.
Crenshaw votes aye. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Armstrong. Armstrong votes aye. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes aye. Miller Meeks. Miller Meeks votes aye. Kamick. Kamick votes aye. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone.
Aye.
Pallone votes aye. Eschew. Eschew votes aye. Deget. Deget votes aye. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes aye. Matsui. Matsui votes aye. Castor. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes.
Aye.
Sarbanes votes aye. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Clark. Clark votes aye. Cardenas. Cardenas votes aye. Ruiz. Ruiz votes aye. Peters. Peters votes aye. Dingell. Dingell votes aye. VC. VC votes aye. Custer. Custer votes aye. Kelly. Kelly votes aye. Badagan. Badagan votes aye. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes aye. Soto. Soto votes aye. Craig. Craig votes aye. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Trahan votes aye. Fletcher. Rogers.
Aye.
Rogers votes aye.
Madam Clerk, how's Mr. Duncan recorded?
Mr. Burgess is not recorded.
Mr. Burgess, yes. How is Mr. Bilirakis recorded?
Mr. Bilirakis is not recorded.
I vote aye.
Mr. Bilirakis votes aye.
How is Mr. Duncan recorded?
Mr. Duncan is not recorded.
Duncan, aye.
Duncan votes aye.
How is Mr. Carter recorded?
Carter is not recorded.
Aye.
Carter votes aye.
How's Mr. Curtis recorded?
Curtis is not recorded.
Curtis votes aye.
Curtis votes aye.
Clerk will report.
Chair Rogers, on that vote, there were 48 ayes and 0 noes.
Ayes have it, and the bill is adopted. Chair calls up H.R. 4045 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 4045, a bill to modernize the hydropower licensing
Without
process.
objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point. So ordered. I now recognize myself for 5 minutes to strike the last word on H.R. 4045. I'd like to start by thanking our colleague, Representative Custer, for working with me over the last several weeks on this important legislation. In Eastern Washington, we're showing the world what's possible when we unleash the potential of hydropower, the largest source of renewable energy in the United States. In Washington state alone, hydropower accounts for nearly 70% of our electricity. This baseload power produced by our dams can be dispatched at a moment's notice, helping businesses keep their lights on and families heat their homes. This reliability is especially important during cold winter months. Without hydropower, our communities would be at serious risk of life-threatening blackouts. Not to mention, these dams are critical to helping us reduce carbon emissions while maintaining reliability. Unleashing hydropower will help the United States substantially further reduce carbon emissions. It is essential for a strong energy mix, especially as we begin incorporating more renewable resources. Hydropower accounts for nearly 40% of the nation's renewable generation. It's necessary for a reliable grid that produces enough energy to meet demand, which will only continue growing. We should be embracing the resources and the infrastructure we have at our disposal, not turning them away. That's where the Hydropower Clean Energy Future Act comes in. Right now, only 3% of the dams in our country actually produce electricity. By leveraging this untapped potential for more hydropower energy, we could more than double hydropower production in the United States without building a single new dam. H.R. 4045 will help us get there by modernizing the burdensome and outdated licensing process that takes on average a decade to complete and is standing in the way of next-generation hydro technology. By removing barriers and rapidly expanding hydropower development, it will help strengthen our energy grid, drive down energy costs, and help secure a clean energy future. This bill also enhances coordination among dozens of agencies by authorizing FERC to set schedules, clarify responsibilities, and resolve disputes. H.R. 4045 will play a pivotal role, bringing more hydropower facilities online while preserving and expanding our already powerful hydropower fleet. It is a real free market climate solution that will ensure America continues to lead the way on clean, renewable, affordable, and reliable energy for generations to come. The bottom line is this: the United States of America has led the world in reducing carbon emissions. And we've done it with technology and innovation, not heavy-handed government mandates. Emissions-free hydropower is a critical part of our energy expansion in America. It's the key to ensuring we continue leading the way towards a cleaner energy future for years to come. So I urge you all to support the passage of H.R. 4045, the Hydropower Clean Energy Future Act, and I yield back. Does anyone else seek recognition? Ranking Member Mr. Pallone.
Thank you, Madam
recognized
Chair.
for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Unfortunately, I can't support moving the bill forward as it stands today for reasons I'll just get into. But first of all, I do want to thank you. After the subcommittee markup, your staff worked in good faith along with mine to try to come to a bipartisan agreement that could work for all of us, and we fell short in that endeavor, but we were able to make significant progress. So I sincerely hope that we're able to return to the negotiating table to find a durable way forward before this bill comes to the floor. And I'm grateful that despite the fact that I'm unable to support the bill today, this amendment reflects, well, I should say the amendments that are coming up, reflect the progress that we were able to make. And let me just talk about that. We were able to address some of my concerns. The majority agreed to get rid of the provisions that would have fined federal and state agencies for trying to follow their statutory responsibilities under the Clean Water Act or the Endangered Species Act. They also agreed to get rid of language exempting small hydropower projects from all environmental reviews and eliminated a cumbersome process that elevated certain provisions of hydropower licenses to the White House for refereeing. And these were all important steps, but as the bill currently stands, I can't support it. I have concerns about doubling the threshold for small hydropower exemptions. I'm also worried about exempting many closed-loop pump storage projects from the licensing requirements of the Federal Power Act. And the bill is setting up projects to not be successful, I think, in Section 3B of the bill, which demands that FERC issue a license to certain types of hydropower projects within 2 years of projects applying to FERC. But there are no guardrails to ensure that these applications are complete. And as Mr. Turpin of FERC's Office of Energy Projects told the Energy Subcommittee back in September at a legislative hearing, that one of the main sources for delay in hydropower licenses is incomplete applications. And finally, this bill also narrows the scope of conditioning authorities under Sections 4E and 18 of the Federal Power Act. In the Senate's Daines-Cantwell hydropower bill, those provisions narrowing the application of conditions are partnered with vital protections extended to tribal nations, allowing those tribal nations to attach mandatory conditions to hydropower licenses. As I stated last year when the Energy Subcommittee had a hearing on what was then the Uncommon Dialogue proposal, I frankly struggle with that trade-off. But to narrow those conditioning authorities without expanding tribal power is a red line. Finally, I want to be able to find a path forward on hydropower licensing reform, but as the conversation in the Senate has made clear, extending mandatory conditioning authority to tribes is a vital component of that reform. And if tribes are going to be part of this bill, we need to engage our House colleagues on the Natural Resources Committee as well. So if we had more time, we might be able to find a way forward on this bill. Unfortunately, our staff's only had a few weeks to try and find common ground, but I hope that this is not rushed to the floor and that instead we all can take time to engage with each other to find a path that works for everyone. With that, again, though, thank you, Madam Chair, and I yield back.
Does anyone else seek recognition on the bill? Chair recognizes, for what purpose does the lady from Washington, Ms. Schreier, seek recognition? Ladies recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair and Ranking Member Pallone, for working so hard to find common ground on hydropower licensing reform. It's so important for my district in particular. Hydropower has provided Washingtonians clean, reliable, affordable energy that is helping keep us on track to reach our state's net zero clean energy goals. And I want to be clear that no energy source is completely clean, and hydropower has had profound impacts on salmon and steelhead populations, and this impacts whole ecosystems and also violates Native American treaty rights. And so we do need to improve the FERC licensing process while also preserving environmental safeguards and recognizing our tribes' right to self-determination and their traditional food and cultural resources. Now, the bill before us today, in its current form, demonstrates really nice bipartisan work, a good start, but it still has a long way to go. We need to improve the FERC licensing process while also preserving environmental protections and treaty rights. Now, today, I'll be voting yes in recognition of this bipartisan work that's been done so far, and with the hope that this work will continue so that we can meet these additional challenges and bring a final reauthorizing bill to the floor that can become law. This progress is a positive step, and I appreciate that work, and I believe we will streamline to come up with a solid, comprehensive licensing process that brings all stakeholders fairly to the table. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Further discussion? Any amendments? I have a bipartisan amendment in the nature of a substitute at the desk. It's labeled FC Ains 01. Clerk will report.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R.
Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with. I'm going to recognize myself for 5 minutes in support of the amendment. This amendment shows the text of H.R. 4045 as favorably forwarded by the Subcommittee on Energy, Climate, and Grid Security on October 25th, 2025. My legislation will unleash clean and reliable hydropower through innovation and licensing reform. Republicans are committed to regular order and transparency, and since the start, we've been engaging our colleagues across the aisle to find bipartisan agreement on licensing reforms. During our subcommittee markup, Representative Custer and I offered a bipartisan amendment to require FERC to consult with affected Indian tribes to protect fish and natural resources. Today's amendment, in the nature of a substitute, reflects that bipartisan work. I urge my colleagues to join me in supporting the amendment, and I yield back. Is there further discussion on the amendment? Okay, if there's no further discussion, I have an amendment to the amendment labeled MGR02. Clerk will report.
Amendment to the amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 4045, offered by Chair Rogers.
Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with. I recognize myself for 5 minutes in support of the amendment. This amendment makes clarifying changes to the bill to strengthen environmental protections, improve consultation with Indian tribes, and bring more certainty to the FERC licensing process. Again, I'd like to thank my colleague, Representative Custer, for working together over the last several weeks to resolve the concerns that were raised in the subcommittee mark. Congress must act to level the playing field so hydropower can compete with other renewable energy resources and battery storage. Under the existing process, it can take several years. As I mentioned, it's on average a decade for projects to get through the burdensome FERC licensing process. With this amendment, we're going to give FERC the tools it needs to conduct environmental reviews in a timely manner, coordinate with participating agencies and tribes, and make informed decisions. This bipartisan amendment will improve the bill and broaden the support, and I urge passage of the amendment. And I yield back. Does anyone else seek to be recognized on the amendment? Ms. Custer, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I move to strike the last word.
Ladies recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to thank you and your staff and thank my own staff, Will Pisano, for their hard work to find common ground on the Hydropower Clean Energy Future Act. Our bipartisan amendment makes some important changes to the proposal, and I'm pleased to support referring the legislation to the full committee with these changes. Before I talk about the good provisions of the amendment and underlying bill, I want to flag one issue that is important to me that we were unable to address: end-of-life decisions for smaller, older hydropower facilities. The average hydropower dam in New Hampshire was built in 1923. While we have some larger facilities, most hydropower facilities are smaller than 10 megawatts, often as low as 5 megawatts. Many of these small, 100-plus-year-old facilities are well-designed and continue to provide important services for the grid and surrounding communities. I think we should prioritize preserving these types of existing hydropower projects, which is why I'm excited to introduce a bipartisan bill with Adrian Smith this week, which will provide an investment tax credit for hydropower asset owners to make dam safety upgrades. But some facilities are in poor condition, and it doesn't pencil out for asset owners to reinvest in certain smaller, outdated projects. Unfortunately, FERC doesn't have a robust licensing surrender process, which leaves asset owners with deteriorating facilities and an unclear end-of-life decision-making process. Moving forward, I hope we can use this bill as a vehicle to provide a more robust FERC process to help asset owners make end-of-life decisions for older, smaller facilities. I firmly believe you can support the broader hydropower industry while recognizing the need to think holistically about small, obsolete dams. Now, to the good things that we accomplished in this amendment and the underlying bill. First, we're creating a true 2-year process for FERC to make licensing decisions to retrofit non-powered dams with hydropower generation and to license new closed-loop pump storage facilities. This will help us add critical clean energy generation and storage capacity to the grid and bring more renewables online. Second, we're providing certainty for all parties in FERC's hydropower relicensing process by clearly defining what conditions can and cannot be included in a hydropower license. This clarity will help speed up the relicensing process. Third, we're creating a new process for FERC to resolve inconsistent or conflicting terms in hydropower licenses. The new process will reduce litigation by providing an opportunity for stakeholders in the licensing process to address inconsistent or conflicting terms before issuing a final license. And finally, thanks to our subcommittee amendment, the bill provides a larger role for tribes in the licensing process, although we should expand this as the bill moves forward. While this bill is far from perfect, on balance, I think this is what compromise looks like. I will support the bill, and I look forward to working with our chair to continue to approve the bill on the way to the floor. And with that, I yield back.
Does anyone else seek to be recognized on the amendment? There's no further discussion. Chair, Mr. Tonko, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I move to strike the last word, please.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Madam Chair, I was happy to hear that you and Ranking Member Pallone have continued to have earnest discussions on this bill. And while the bill before us today may not have resolved all of those issues, I still believe there is an opportunity for bipartisanship on hydropower licensing reform, as has been proven by similar efforts in the Senate. I fully recognize that hydropower has an important role to play in our clean energy mix, and that there are major challenges in the relicensing process. But it is important that we find that right balance, ensuring that states and tribes and environmentalists have adequate say in the process. So with that, I urge the committee's leadership to continue negotiations on this bill and try to reach bipartisan agreement before the bill comes to the floor. And with that, Madam Chair, I thank you and yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion on the amendment? Seeing none, the vote occurs on the amendment to the Ains. All those in favor say aye. Those opposed, nay. Amendment is agreed to, is adopted. The vote now occurs on the Ains as amended. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed, nay. The ayes have it. The Ains is adopted as amended. Final passage, vote occurs on final passage as amended. Clerk will call the vote. Roll.
Burgess. Burgess votes aye. Latta. Aye. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Johnson. Aye. Johnson votes aye. Bouchon. Hudson. Hudson votes aye. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Carter votes aye. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Dunn. Curtis. Curtis votes aye. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Armstrong. Armstrong votes aye. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes aye. Miller Meeks. Miller Meeks votes aye. Kamick. Obernolte. Pallone.
No.
Pallone votes no. Eschew. Eschew votes no. Deget. Deget votes no. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes no. Matsui. Matsui votes no. Castor. Castor votes no. Sarbanes. No. Sarbanes votes no. Tonko.
No.
Tonko votes no. Clark. No. Clark votes no. Cardenas. Cardenas votes no. Ruiz. Ruiz votes no. Peters. Peters votes aye. Dingell. Vesey. Vesey votes no. Custer. Custer votes aye. Kelly. Kelly votes no. Badagan. Badagan votes no. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes no. Soto. Soto votes no. Craig. Craig votes no. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Trahan votes no. Fletcher. Rogers.
Aye.
Rogers votes aye.
Madam Clerk, how is Mr. Bilirakis recorded?
Mr. Bilirakis is not recorded. Bilirakis votes aye.
How's Mr. Crenshaw recorded?
Mr. Crenshaw is not recorded. Crenshaw votes aye.
How's Ms. Kamick recorded?
Ms. Kamick is not recorded. Kamick votes aye.
How's Ms. Dingell recorded? You are recorded.
Dingell is not recorded. Dingell votes no.
Clerk will report.
Chair Rogers, on that vote, there were 28 ayes and 19 noes, I'm sorry.
Ayes have it. Bill's adopted. Chair calls up H.R. 4167 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 4167, a bill to prohibit the Secretary of Energy from changing energy conservation standards for distribution transformers for
Without
certain...
objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill will be open for amendment at any point so ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill? Mr. Hudson, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
Seek to speak on the bill.
You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I mentioned earlier, 1 year ago, we experienced an attack on our energy grid in Moore County, North Carolina. I introduced H.R. 4167 with my constituents in mind. I appreciate the support and dedication my fellow committee members have shown for prioritizing grid security and for those who participated in a field hearing in Moore County this past June. Our field hearing and hearings we've had since and conversations we've had as a committee have made clear that a major component of our grid vulnerability has to do with our energy grid supply chain. This lesson learned is not controversial and is certainly not partisan. In fact, I was encouraged when the Biden administration issued a request for information in October of 2022 to determine how the Department of Energy could best leverage the Defense Production Act authority invoked by Joe Biden to accelerate domestic production of transformers and electric grid components. Unfortunately, the Biden administration's proposed efficiency standards for distribution transformers is in direct opposition to their intended goals and threatens to further disrupt our domestic supply chain. When they proposed this standard in December of 2022, the administration ignored the fact that our transformers are already at least 97.7% energy efficient. They ignored that the new standards would require all transformer manufacturers to switch their production lines from the industry standard of grain-oriented electrical cores to amorphous steel cores, despite the fact that the U.S. only has 2 domestic manufacturers of these grain-oriented cores and only 1 domestic manufacturer of the amorphous steel cores. They ignored the chemistry of the cores themselves, as amorphous steel is significantly more brittle and thus a more difficult material to manufacture with. I'm thrilled to see the committee move today to protect America's distribution transformer supply chain. The Department of Energy's proposed standard would yield minor energy savings at the enormous cost of the disruption of our supply chain. My legislation ensures our transformers remain over 97% energy efficient while giving the industry 5 years to strengthen domestic supply chains at current regulatory standards. Take it from me and my 45,000 neighbors in Moore County. We cannot afford disruptions to our grid. These disruptions are dangerous, they're costly, and they're unacceptable. The people of Moore County suffered when our grid was attacked. Thanks to the hard work of the dedicated men and women of Duke Energy who worked day and night in the cold, who cannibalized spare parts from another transformer somewhere else and brought them to Moore County to put ours back in operation. But future attacks could be worse. And we have a responsibility to do all that we can to learn from this obvious vulnerability. At the very least, we should not make the situation worse. I'm grateful for my colleagues on this committee who have signed on as co-sponsors, as well as the support of constituent-facing associations, including the National Rural Electric Cooperative Association, National Electrical Manufacturers Association, National Association of Home Builders, Edison Electric Institute, Leading Builders of America, and American Public Power Association. I urge my colleagues to support this legislation. By doing so, we will strengthen our domestic energy supply chain, strengthen our security posture, and lower energy costs, all while reducing our country's carbon footprint. And with that, Madam Chair,
Gentleman yield.
I would be happy to yield to the chairman of the Energy Subcommittee.
I thank the gentleman for authoring this bill, and I'm glad it's on the markup today. It's not just about, attacks to the grid and replacing components that are necessary. It's about the economy. It's about growing our economy, meeting the developers, meeting the municipal needs where there are shortages right now, because some of it's COVID related, some of it may be policy related, but at the end of the day, having more transformers and other critical components that make our electric system work is critical as we continue to try to modernize our grid, to attach more renewable energy or other forms of energy that come online for power generation and delivery. So this is an important piece of legislation, and I urge my colleagues to support as well. With that, I yield back to the gentleman.
I thank the gentleman. Thank you for your leadership on this issue and for the work you've put into helping to understand the challenges, the vulnerabilities, but also the solutions so that we can make sure this never happens again. Thank you for that. And with that, I yield back.
Chair recognizes the ranking member, Mr. Pallone, for 5 minutes. On the
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I'm speaking in opposition to the bill. As I noted at the Energy Subcommittee markup, despite the name, this bill has nothing to do with the distribution transformer supply chain. And I want to be clear, it's critical that we take action to help ease the shortage of distribution transformers nationwide. That shortage is deeply concerning, and I've been dismayed that our Republican majority has, in my opinion, only used it as a talking point rather than attempting to do anything about it. And I was disappointed that they voted against Ms. Schreier's amendment at the Energy Subcommittee markup that would have given the Department of Energy additional authorities to build out the domestic supply chain for distribution transformers and electrical steel. And I was also disappointed when not a single Republican joined us last year in requesting appropriations to fuel the Biden administration's admirable use of the Defense Production Act to produce more of these desperately needed transformers right here at home. The fact of the matter is that while congressional Democrats and President Biden are serious about addressing the transformer supply chain issues, I think our House Republicans have demonstrated again that they are not. And what they are serious about, however, is attacking energy efficiency standards that have nothing to do with the current transformer shortage. 30 years ago, Congress passed the Bipartisan Energy Policy Act of '92, which required DOE to create and finalize efficiency standards for distribution transformers. It also required DOE to review its transformer efficiency standards once every 6 years. And it's not a suggestion, it's a requirement in the law. And yet the Trump administration ignored that requirement, blowing past the 2019 deadline to re-examine transformer efficiency standards. Now, the Department of Energy was taken to court over this and was given a deadline of next June to decide whether or not to update its transformer efficiency standards. And this bill will get in the way of allowing the DOE to do its job and bar DOE from finalizing standards, even if DOE finds that those standards are technologically feasible and will save Americans money and decrease their energy usage. And make no mistake, the draft standards that the DOE published in December saves Americans money. It would save Americans roughly $15 billion after it goes into effect. And DOE is now hard at work deciding whether or not it needs to finalize a new standard and whether those standards would be technologically feasible and economically justified, the criteria we've already established in law. You know, energy efficiency used to be a bipartisan issue in Congress. Republicans used to support lowering energy bills. It's unfortunate that those days, I should say, seem to be behind us now, and that this markup is seeing an all-out partisan attack on energy efficiency standards. And for those reasons, I urge opposition to this bill. And Madam Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Does anyone seek recognition on the bill? Mr. Balderson, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to strike the last word.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. As we've discussed, the Department of Energy's proposed rule on efficiency standards will require manufacturers to shift from a grain-oriented electrical steel, or GOES, cores to the amorphous steel cores in distribution transformer production. This proposal would completely upend the supply chain for the distribution transformer industry, even though standards for these transformers are already 97% energy efficient. As I've mentioned before, if implemented, the department's proposal directly threatens 1,500 good-paying union jobs at Cleveland Cliffs to GOES facilities in Butler, Pennsylvania, Representative Mike Kelly represents, and my district, my hometown, Zanesville, Ohio. Following the announcement of the proposal, the company's CEO wrote to Secretary Granholm stating, nearly 70% of the electrical steels that Cleveland Cliff produces are used in distribution transformer cores without a market for these GOES. Cleveland Cliff's production of both GOES and non-oriented electric steel, or NOES, would be completely unsustainable. The company would have no choice but to discontinue the production of GOES for this market. GOES for the power transformer market and NOES needed for electrical vehicles and other applications. The Protecting America's Distribution Transformer Supply Chain Act prohibits the department from imposing these disastrous standards and upending the supply chain for critical grid components. I'm proud to be an original co-sponsor of this legislation and urge my colleagues to support this bill. Madam Chair, I yield back.
The gentleman yields back. Is there further discussion? Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill? Are there any amendments? Mr. Sarbanes, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I have an amendment at the desk. It's labeled FC_MN_02.
Clerk will report.
Amendment to H.R. 4167, offered by Mr. Sarbanes. Page 2, line 14.
Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with. Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes in support of his amendment.
Thanks, Madam Chair. I'm offering the amendment because I feel like the conversation we're having, at least in terms of how it's being presented by the majority, is ignoring some of the reality here. As written, the base bill would totally prohibit DOE from carrying out its responsibilities under the Energy Policy and Conservation Act with regard to distribution transformers for the next 5 years, as we've heard, which is effectively a CRA without actually being a CRA. If the proposed standard in question, which DOE issued nearly a year ago, was restrictive and didn't result in sizable savings, I guess I could understand why you would be taking this position and might support the bill and so forth. Even then, I still wouldn't support this process because statutorily stopping DOE in its tracks as it works to improve and finalize its proposal is something I strongly object to regardless of the intention behind it. I just don't think that makes any sense. But we don't need to have a hypothetical conversation about what would be right in that instance because, as Ranking Member Pallone just said, according to recent estimates, DOE's proposal would result in energy savings that would in turn save consumers $15 billion. And I'd ask unanimous consent to enter these estimates into the record, Madam Chair. A vote for this bill is not only a vote to stop DOE from deploying its expertise. Let's keep in mind that's one of the major reasons we invest in these agencies, because they assemble experts that can make these judgments much better than we can. So if you vote for the bill, you're going to stop DOE from deploying its expertise to issue an improved final rule. This is what they do. But also, it's a vote that would ask American families to forego $15 billion in savings. That doesn't make any sense. So my amendment proposes a compromise. It leaves the requirements and restrictions of the bill in place, but it provides an exception to allow any proposed standard that results in net benefits of $5 billion or more. This would ensure that any standard that is well thought out and designed to lower everyone's energy bills would be allowed, while any poorly designated or, poorly designed standards that risk more costs than benefits would not be permitted. So it's a common sense amendment. And I think that it would make more it would bring more benefit to the conversation than what the bill itself does. And I hope that everyone on both sides of the aisle can support this common sense amendment. I urge its adoption, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Further discussion? Mr. Hudson, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
I wish to speak in opposition to the amendment.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. America's energy reliability, resiliency, and independence are hard to put a price tag on. But if I had to do it, it would be a lot more than $5 billion. And this isn't because I'm in denial about the benefits of energy efficiency standards, because I'm not. Common sense standards can be one of the most effective means in decreasing energy demand, making energy more affordable, and lowering our emissions. This is something we can all agree is a good thing. But these efficiency standards have effects beyond dollar amounts, and we can't ignore this. While the savings might sound nice, they're outweighed by the other effects the standard will have. And if we bury our heads in the sand on this and adopt this amendment, we will be paying a price. These standards threaten the reliability and resiliency of our grid. Our transformer manufacturers cannot keep pace with the current demand, and their wait times are rising exponentially. This is putting housing and infrastructure projects on hold or simply leading to these projects being canceled altogether. These standards threaten our energy independence. Our country has only 2 domestic manufacturers of these grain-oriented cores, and only 1 domestic manufacturer of the amorphous steel cores. As Moore County Congressman, I can promise you our community didn't need $5 billion in energy savings following the attack on our grid. We needed parts for the grid. What keeps me awake at night is wondering how much worse this would have been if more than 2 substations had been attacked. How many lives would have been lost? Mr. Pallone said the bill doesn't do enough, but what I'm suggesting is let's at least not make the situation worse. This amendment does not fix our underlying supply chain crisis. It makes it worse. So I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment, and I yield back. I would yield the balance of my time to the chairman.
Thank you. I mean, you're right. I agree with Mr. Pallone. It doesn't go far enough. We need to really stand up a domestic supply chain for capacitors and generators and really mining for copper and all the things. If we're going to make this utility grid actually work, regardless of what side of the political spectrum you're on, if you like renewables, they need to be connected to transmission lines. They need capacitors that either amp up or amp down the wattage that goes on the lines. We need transformers for... Talk to your utilities, talk to your commissions of public works, talk to your municipalities, talk to your home builders, talk to the developers in general, and you'll find out that there is a drastic need in this country for more critical components like transformers. And so this is a step in the right direction. I think the amendment that was offered does nothing but gut the underlying bill, or actually changes it dramatically where it's not going to be effective. So this is a step in the right direction that Congress should take. And I agree with Plum. We ought to do more. So I'm going to work on another bill to help step up and stand up that domestic supply chain for critical components. Critical components. I use that word not lightly, critical. We're at a stage in this nation where we have got to do more if we're going to continue growing economically the way we are. So I thank the gentleman from North Carolina for putting the underlying bill in, and I oppose this amendment. I yield back.
I thank the gentleman. And Madam Chair, I would point out, too, that the author of this amendment mentioned the fact that this would be Congress disrupting the plans of this agency. I would just point out that it's the job of Congress to pass laws. It's the job of the agencies to carry those out. And if they've got it wrong, then I think we need to step in and correct it. And that's exactly what this legislation seeks to do. And again, it is not saying we don't agree that energy efficiency standards are important. It says let's give a 5-year pause to allow the domestic manufacturing supply chain to catch up and to adapt. And so I would, again, ask my colleagues to oppose this amendment and support the underlying bill. And with that, I'll yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Further discussion? Seeing none, the vote occurs on the Sarbanes amendment. All those in favor say aye. Oh, you want a roll call? Yep. A roll call has been requested. Clerk will call the roll.
Burgess. Burgess votes no. Latta. Guthrie. Guthrie votes no. Griffith. Griffith votes no. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes no. Johnson. Johnson votes no. Bouchon. Hudson. Hudson votes no. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes no. Carter. Carter votes no. Duncan. Duncan votes no. Palmer. Palmer votes no. Dunn. Curtis. Curtis votes no. Lesko. Lesko votes no. Pence. Pence votes no. Crenshaw. Crenshaw votes no. Joyce. Joyce votes no. Armstrong. Weber. Weber votes no. Allen. Allen votes no. Balderson. Balderson votes no. Fulcher. Fulcher votes no. Pfluger. Pfluger votes no. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes no. Miller Meeks. Miller Meeks votes no. Kamick. Kamick votes no. Obernolte. Pallone.
Aye.
Pallone votes aye. Eschew. Eschew votes aye. Deget. Deget votes aye. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes aye. Matsui. Matsui votes aye. Castor. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes.
Aye.
Sarbanes votes aye. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Clark. Clark votes aye. Cardenas. Cardenas votes aye. Ruiz. Ruiz votes aye. Peters. Dingell. Dingell votes aye. VC. VC votes aye. Custer. Custer votes aye. Kelly. Kelly votes aye. Badagan. Badagan votes aye. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes aye. Soto. Soto votes aye. Craig. Craig votes aye. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Trahan votes aye. Fletcher. Rogers.
No.
Rogers votes no. Mr.
Madam
Latta
Clerk-
is not recorded. Latta votes no.
Madam Clerk, how's Mr. Peters recorded?
Mr. Peters is not recorded. Peters votes aye.
Clerk will report.
Chair Rogers, on that vote, there were 22 ayes and 25 noes.
Amendment is defeated, is not agreed to. Are there further amendments? Further discussion? Seeing none, the vote occurs on approving HR 4167, and a roll call vote has been requested. Clerk will call the roll.
Burgess. Burgess votes aye. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson. Johnson votes aye. Bouchon. Hudson. Hudson votes aye. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Carter votes aye. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Palmer votes aye. Dunn. Curtis. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Crenshaw votes aye. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Armstrong. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes aye. Miller Meeks. Miller Meeks votes aye. Kamick. Kamick votes aye. Obernolte. Pallone.
No.
Pallone votes no. Eschew. Eschew votes no. Deget. Deget votes no. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes no. Matsui. Matsui votes no. Castor. Castor votes no. Sarbanes. Sarbanes votes no. Tonko.
No.
Tonko votes no. Clark. Clark votes no. Cardenas. Cardenas votes no. Ruiz. Ruiz votes no. Peters. Peters votes no. Dingell. Dingell votes no. VC. VC votes no. Custer. Custer votes no. Kelly. Kelly votes no. Badagan. Badagan votes no. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes no. Soto. Soto votes no. Craig. Craig votes no. Schreier. Schreier votes no. Trahan. Trahan votes no. Fletcher. Rogers.
Aye.
Rogers votes aye.
Clerk will report.
Chair Rogers, on that vote, there were 24 ayes and 22 noes.
Ayes have it, and the bill is adopted. Chair calls up H.R. 6192 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 6192, a bill to amend the Energy Policy Conservation Act.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with, and the bill is open for amendment at any point. So ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill? Ms. Lesko, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to speak in support of my bill.
Gentlelady recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm proud to sponsor the H.R. 6192, Hands Off Our Home Appliances Act. This Wall Street Journal article makes clear why my bill is needed. Let me just read a couple verbs or things from it. It says, for months, Donna King experimented with the various settings of her washing machine, trying to get her clothes to stop coming out covered in detergent residue. In the era of tightening water and energy standards, King thinks the machine just doesn't use enough water, with clothes emerging nearly dry to the touch. She regularly runs her T-shirts through the washing machine a second time. Quote, I'm all for saving the environment, but this ain't the way to do it. If you got to do something 2 or 3 times, the 59-year-old said, the standard is great on paper, but when it comes to practical and real-life situations, it's a bunch of S. I support energy efficiency. Energy efficiency over the last 45 years has helped save consumers real money and has lessened the need to build new power plants. However, the Biden administration has taken this program and corrupted its purpose. It has made up information and is using the process to deny American consumers the choices they deserve. The Biden administration has unleashed its radical environmentalists to use the current law to try to ban stoves, gas stoves, and other home appliances. It's time to update the Energy Policy and Conservation Act, also known as EPCA, to make it more useful to consumers. This bill puts real energy savings back into consumers' pockets. No longer can DOE claim that 12 cents a month in savings is considered economically justified, like they claim for their ban on gas stoves. With this bill, this will no longer be acceptable. This bill does several things that will help consumers. First, cost to low-income consumers must be considered, not just given lip service. This bill will require a new standard to provide a 3-year payback. This is especially helpful to low-income consumers. Second, this bill requires that any new standard actually saves significant energy. It requires any new standard for any product must achieve at least a 10% reduction in energy or water usage, and the new standard must reduce overall energy usage in the United States over 0.3 quads over a 30-year period. Both of these standards are common sense and very doable. Consumers will turn these energy efficiency savings into real dollars in their pockets. This bill will prevent the banning of any household appliance. Any new standard cannot affect the duty cycle charging time and runtime of the covered product. Clothes washers and dryers will have to actually clean your clothes and dishes. The compatibility of the covered product with existing systems, the lifespan of the product, and they can no longer approve a standard that discriminates based upon the type of fuel being used. In Biden's DOE, homeowners will no longer be able to choose the type of furnace their home requires. A recent finalized standard for home furnaces will outlaw non-condensing natural gas furnaces. Millions of homes, including those in my district, currently have non-condensing furnaces. When they need to replace them, it may not be practical or even possible to make the switch if Biden gets his way. This is especially true of older homes disproportionately owned by low and fixed income households. This bill will put sanity back into energy standards, energy efficiency standards. I support common sense energy efficiency standards, and for the first time, this bill will put in law a common sense approach to energy efficiency. This will end abuses to a very good program. I hope my colleagues will vote yes on this bill. And Madam Chair, I also ask unanimous consent to include the Wall Street Journal article that I referenced into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
And I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Further discussion? Mrs. Dingell, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
Madam Chairwoman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I'm disappointed to see a number of bills under consideration at today's markup that would gut energy efficiency standards. We know energy efficiency standards are supported by many Americans. With rising energy bills, strong efficiency standards are an important way we can reduce energy consumption and save Americans money in the long term. However, this bill would impede the Department of Energy's ability to adopt rules that can make appliances more energy efficient and still do their job, and unfortunately, it'll drive up energy bills in the process. And on top of this, the bill would jeopardize existing standards. Revoking efficiency requirements would set us back on achieving massive cost and energy savings that benefit consumers across the country. Some of my colleagues may argue that the cost of efficiency standards don't outweigh the benefits. However, I want to remind all of my colleagues that the Department of Energy has a robust process to issue efficiency standards that include a requirement that the result in significant standards are technologically feasible and economically justifiable. Legislation like this threatens to undo the progress our nation has already made and hamstrings the ability of the experts at the Department of Energy to carry out its important mission. And before I close and urge my colleagues to oppose this, I'm going to tell my colleagues I like my gas stove. I've told the Secretary of Energy I like it, and she likes hers. With that, I urge my colleagues to oppose this. Thank you, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Further discussion? Are there any amendments? Mrs. Castor, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
I have an amendment at the desk, Madam Chair. It's FCMN 02.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 6192, offered by Ms. Castor.
Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with. Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes in support of her amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Colleagues, energy-efficient appliances are very popular. They save our neighbors money. They save on electric bills. More efficient appliances like washers and dryers and refrigerators and dishwashers think about when you go and you've saved your hard-earned money, you make that investment in your upgraded appliance, and these days, the added bonus is they save you on your electric bill. And that's one reason they are so popular, and we shouldn't throw a wrench into progress. It's been about 40 years that we've Congress directed Department of Energy to help upgrade appliances along the way, and the Department of Energy has worked hand in hand with appliance makers, and it's good old-fashioned American innovation that year after year they get better and better and better. They're more efficient. They save, not only do they improve, but they save significant dollars. The typical new refrigerator uses 75% less energy than its 1973 counterpart. It has 20% more storage capacity and a lot of modern features. Similarly, clothes washers use 70% less energy than 1990. They have 50% more tub capacity. There's no reason to throw a wrench into progress, and there's no reason for my Republican colleagues to ask our hardworking neighbors back home to pay more money. If you could give a title to amendments
My amendment will be titled Hands Out of Our Pocketbooks, because this bill is simply going to cost people more money. And that's why I'm offering this amendment. It would require the Energy Secretary to publish the report on the effects of revoking the existing energy conservation standards. This bill also will hamper energy efficiency savings. It adds a duplicative and unnecessary new test. I know you always talk about you don't want more bureaucracy. Well, you're adding more bureaucracy because DOE is already required to undergo an extensive process to determine new energy efficiency standards for appliances. In particular, the agency must ensure that standards can be reasonably met by appliance manufacturers and the standards are economically justifiable. This bill also would create a new petition process that would enable future administrations to swiftly revoke energy efficiency standards without any public input. That's just anti-consumer. Ultimately, this bill is just another example of Republicans siding with polluters over the best interests of our hardworking neighbors back home. There's no reason, again, to drive up family energy bills by forcing them to keep old, inefficient, polluting appliances on the market. So I'm siding with the people over polluters, and I urge you to do the same and adopt my amendment. Thank you, Madam Chair. I yield back. Gentlelady yields back for the discussion. Mrs. Lesko, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move to strike the last word to speak in opposition to this amendment.
Gentlelady's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This amendment is duplicative and unnecessary. The underlying bill already requires the Department of Energy to consider the impacts of energy efficiency standards. On page 3 of the underlying bill, there is a look-back provision which requires the Secretary of Energy to examine several criteria before amending or revoking an efficiency standard. The criteria on page 3 includes the cost to consumers, the level of energy savings, the technological feasibility, and the commercial availability of products. Furthermore, page 6 of the underlying bill requires an economic analysis that specifically examines the cost to low-income households and the impact on employment. For these reasons, this amendment is duplicative and unnecessary. The Hands Off Our Home Appliances Act ensures that DOE standards are cost-effective and technologically feasible. In fact, one of the whole purposes of my bill is to save consumers money so that we're not changing things where appliances cost more to the consumer without good savings. And with that, I urge my colleagues to oppose this amendment, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back for the discussion on the amendment. Seeing none, the vote occurs on the amendment. A roll call vote has been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Burgess. Burgess votes no. Latta. Guthrie. Guthrie votes no. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes no. I'm sorry. Griffith. Griffith votes no. Johnson. Johnson votes no. Bouchon. Hudson. Hudson votes no. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes no. Carter. Carter votes no. Duncan. Duncan votes no. Palmer. Palmer votes no. Dunn. Curtis. Lesko. Lesko votes no. Pence. Pence votes no. Crenshaw. Joyce. Joyce votes no. Armstrong. Weber. Weber votes no. Allen. Allen votes no. Balderson. Balderson votes no. Fulcher. Fulcher votes no. Pfluger. Pfluger votes no. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes no. Miller-Meeks. Kamick. Kamick votes no. Obernolte. Obernolte votes no. Pallone.
Aye.
Pallone votes aye. Eshoo. Eshoo votes aye. DeGette. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes aye. Matsui. Matsui votes aye. Castor. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes. Sarbanes votes aye. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Clark. Clark votes aye. Cardenas. Ruiz. Peters. Peters votes aye. Dingell. Dingell votes aye. VC. VC votes aye. Custer. Custer votes aye. Kelly. Kelly votes aye. Barragan. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes aye. Soto. Soto votes aye. Craig. Craig votes aye. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Trahan votes aye. Fletcher. Rogers.
No.
Rogers votes no.
Madam Chair, how is Latta recorded?
Mr. Latta is not recorded.
No.
Latta votes no.
Mr. Armstrong?
Mr. Armstrong is not recorded. Mr. Armstrong votes no.
Madam Clerk, how is Mr. Bouchon recorded?
Bouchon is not recorded. Bouchon votes no.
Mr. Crenshaw?
Mr. Crenshaw is not recorded. Crenshaw votes no.
Mr. Ruiz?
Mr. Ruiz is not recorded. Ruiz votes aye.
Mr. Cardenas?
Mr. Cardenas votes aye.
Ms. Barragan?
Ms. Barragan is not recorded. Barragan votes aye.
Is he gone? Is he gone? Clerk will report.
Chair Rogers, on that vote, there were 21 ayes and 26 noes.
The noes have it. The amendment is not adopted. Are there further amendments? For what purpose? Mrs. Lesko has an amendment. What's the number of your amendment?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The amendment is HR 6192 FCA_01.
Clerk will report.
Amendment to H.R. 6192, offered by Ms. Lesko.
Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with. Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes in support of her amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This clarifying amendment allows for a uniform standard across the United States. I encourage my colleagues to vote yes in support of my amendment, and I yield back.
Further discussion? Mr. Tonko, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I rise in opposition to this amendment.
Gentleman's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. This amendment takes a bad bill and makes it worse. If adopted, this amendment considers a revoked efficiency standard to be considered as in effect for the sole purpose of preempting state action, thus preventing states from issuing related standards. This bill, especially with this amendment, would further gut appliance efficiency standards and risk increasing energy consumption, increasing energy bills, and therefore increasing emissions. Preemption makes no sense here. If the federal government does not intend to protect consumers and promote efficiency, why shouldn't states exercise their right to do so? This amendment shows that the majority is not at all serious about energy efficiency and is committed to making it as difficult as possible to issue efficiency standards at the state and the federal levels. I oppose this amendment and urge my colleagues to vote against this amendment and the bill as a whole. And with that, Madam Chair, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Further discussion on the amendment? The vote occurs on the Lesko amendment. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. The ayes have it. The amendment is adopted. You do want a roll call on Lesko? On the Lesko amendment? Okay, okay. Are there further amendments? Seeing none, the question occurs on approving HR 6192 as amended, and a roll call vote has been requested. The clerk will call the roll.
Burgess. Burgess votes aye. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson. Johnson votes aye. Bouchon. Bouchon votes aye. Hudson. Hudson votes aye. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Carter votes aye. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Palmer votes aye. Dunn. Curtis. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Crenshaw votes aye. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Armstrong. Armstrong votes aye. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes aye. Miller Meeks. Kamick. Kamick votes aye. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone.
No.
Pallone votes no. Eschew. Eschew votes no. Deget. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes no. Matsui. Matsui votes no. Castor. Castor votes no. Sarbanes.
No.
Sarbanes votes no. Tonko.
No.
Tonko votes no. Clark. Clark votes no. Cardenas. Cardenas votes no. Ruiz. Ruiz votes no. Peters. Peters votes no. Dingell. Dingell votes no. Vesey. Vesey votes no. Custer. Kelly. Kelly votes no. Badagan. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes no. Soto. Soto votes no. Craig. Craig votes no. Schreier. Schreier votes no. Trahan. Trahan. Trahan votes no. Fletcher. Rogers.
Aye.
Rogers votes aye.
Madam Clerk, how is Ms. Berrigan recorded?
Badagan is not recorded. Badagan votes no.
Clerk will report.
Chair Rogers, on that vote, there were 26 ayes and 20 noes.
Ayes have it. Bill is adopted. Chair calls up H.R. 6185 and asks the clerk to report.
H.R. 6185, a bill to require coordination among federal agencies on regulatory actions that affect the
Without
reliable
objection, the first reading
operation.
of the bill is dispensed with. The bill will be open for amendment at any point. Mr. Duncan, for what purpose do you seek recognition?
Madam Chair, I'm asked to speak on the bill.
You're recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. This bill would amend the Federal Power Act to require coordination between FERC and any federal agency promulgating a regulation that could threaten the reliability of the bulk power system. The electric system is vital for all aspects of our economy. FERC's mission is, in part, to ensure reliable, safe, secure, and economically efficient energy services at a reasonable cost. In order to ensure reliable energy services, FERC, in consultation with NERC, must be able to share its expertise on the impacts to reliability when an agency proposes rules that affect that reliability. Years of policies favoring certain types of resources are jeopardizing the survival of dispatchable generation and hampering the ability of grid operators to maintain reliability. The Energy Subcommittee heard from many voices in recent hearings, FERC, NERC, and the grid operators, about the reliability crisis facing our electric grid. In fact, according to NERC's recent winter reliability assessment, a large portion of the North American bulk power system is at risk of insufficient electricity supplies during peak winter conditions. These predicted blackouts are not a result of severe weather or the lack of transmission capacity, but because of forced retirement of reliable dispatchable generation units, many the result of regulations or market subsidies. Regulations from agencies like EPA seek to impose political agendas that would drastically alter the makeup of our energy and electric system without proper consideration for or analysis of grid reliability impacts. For example, there is a Clean Power Plan 2.0 proposal, which essentially aims to regulate coal and eventually natural gas out of electricity generation. We heard from FERC, grid operators, and the states in various hearings and letters that the EPA did not consult with them or incorporate their feedback when developing the proposal. In fact, in a response to the Senate Republican inquiry, FERC Commissioner Danley wrote that he has, quote, concerns that EPA did not offer the commission an appropriate opportunity to study the reliability impacts of the proposed rule, unquote. In a letter to EPA commenting on the proposed rule, Danley also stated that, quote, when proposing a rule with such profound consequences, responsible decision-making requires hard data, unquote. My legislation puts requirements in place to ensure agencies like the EPA get that hard data before proposing consequential rules like the Clean Power Plan 2.0. And Congress is not the only one calling for measures like the GRID Act. At FERC's recent annual Reliability Technical Conference, multiple witnesses from utilities to states asked FERC to study the reliability impacts of EPA's proposed Clean Power 2.0. The GRID Act is necessary to ensure affordable, reliable electricity for Americans by requiring that agencies coordinate with FERC, the agency that Congress has put in charge of reliability, before proposing policies that undercut grid reliability. So I urge my colleagues to support H.R. 6185, and with that, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Further discussion? For what, Ms. Castor, for what purpose do you seek
Just strike
recognition?
the last word.
Gentlelady's recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Members, I rise in opposition to the GRID Act. There is a lot that we have to do working together to modernize America's electric grid, but this is not it. I have great respect for the subcommittee chairman from South Carolina, but he's really soft-pedaling the impact of this proposed bill. It's pretty darn radical, because what it would do, it would elevate FERC above every other agency. They'd kind of create this super agency that would rule over other cabinet level agencies. It's really another attempt by my GOP colleagues to throw a wrench into energy efficiency and the move towards clean energy and all we're trying to do to reduce pollution. It doesn't simply encourage the agencies to come talk with FERC or say we're going to coordinate it. It puts FERC in charge. FERC could veto any rule or action by any other federal agency. That's unprecedented. And frankly, it's absurd. No other federal agency has the power to veto another agency's rule in this way. The bill takes away power from the president and Senate-confirmed cabinet officers, invests it in an independent agency that is not democratically accountable. Moreover, it allows any state utility service commission to petition FERC to utilize this power. That would create a massive drain on the commission's resources and further politicize state utility service commissions. FERC itself testified in subcommittee a few months ago that it lacks the resources to properly evaluate rules from agencies like this. And importantly, the commission already has the power and does express reliability concerns to EPA and other agencies. In fact, just last month, FERC hosted a technical conference on reliability and dedicated substantial time to EPA's power plant rule, where EPA leadership answered questions from FERC commissioners and solicited feedback from stakeholders. So like I said, there's much more that we need to do to modernize America's electric grid, but this is really a backdoor attempt to kind of slap down EPA's mission directed by Congress to reduce pollution from power plants. It's a bill about reliability in name only. It's really a harmful, radical bill. So I urge my colleagues to reject it, and I yield back my time.
Gentlelady yields back. Further discussion? Any amendments? Ms. Degette.
I have an amendment at the desk, FC_MN_02.
The clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment to H.R. 6185, offered by Ms. Degette. Page 1, line 8, strike section.
Without objection, the reading of the amendment is dispensed with. Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes in support of her amendment.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I offered this amendment at the subcommittee markup back in October, but I think the issue it raises is so fundamental and existential to the bill, it bears repeating. In September, the Energy Subcommittee heard testimony from FERC's Director of its Office of Electric Reliability. He clearly stated, FERC does not have the ability or the staff capacity to review all the rules emerging from other agencies for their impact on power sector reliability. It just simply doesn't. He was clear enough that the headline in E&E News the next morning was, quote, FERC official rejects Republican bill targeting Biden rules, end quote. Madam Chair, Mr. Chairman, I'd like to ask unanimous consent to put that article into the record.
Without objection, so ordered.
And frankly, building off the point that Representative Castor just raised, I'm glad that the reporting on this bill was able to see right through the claim that it's about reliability, because it's not. It's about continued attacks on greenhouse gas and efficiency rules by the other side. But more to the point, the bill would be simply impossible to implement right now. It demands that FERC do something that FERC itself admits it has no power to do, not just from a hiring standpoint, but also from an access to data, information, and modeling capabilities standpoint. Analyzing the impact of rules on the electric sector is a tricky task, and we're asking FERC to do it without giving it the resources to properly do so. So I have a number of concerns with the bill, as you can hear. The amendment would not fix all of them, but it would fix the most egregious by simply insisting that the bill's requirements not take effect until FERC has certified it has sufficient capacity to carry out the bill's mandate. I'm sure everybody will want to support this amendment because they want FERC to be able to do its job. If you think the testimony we heard back in September was incorrect, then FERC will be able to certify that it can carry out the bill the day after enactment and nothing will change. If, however, the testimony from the guy in charge was accurate, this amendment will save us and the industry from being thrown into uncertainty, as FERC is required to do something that it simply lacks the ability to accomplish. And so I'm sure, as I said, everybody will support it. I urge your support, and I yield back.
Gentlelady yields back. Anyone else seeking recognition on the bill? Okay, seeing none. Anyone have an amendment to offer? Oh, this is the amendment? Okay. I was moving around, so I apologize. Okay, anyone seek recognition to speak on the amendment? Seeing none, all those in favor say aye. He's asked for a roll call vote, so let's just proceed on to that. Clerk will call the roll.
Burgess. Burgess votes no. Latta. Latta votes no. Guthrie. Guthrie votes no. Griffith. Griffith votes no. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes no. Johnson. Bouchon. Bouchon votes no. Hudson. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes no. Carter. Duncan. Duncan votes no. Palmer. Palmer votes no. Dunn. Curtis. Lesko. Lesko votes no. Pence. Pence votes no. Crenshaw. Crenshaw votes no. Joyce. Joyce votes no. Armstrong. Armstrong votes no. Weber. Allen. Allen votes no. Balderson. Balderson votes no. Fulcher. Pfluger. Pfluger votes no. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes no. Miller-Meeks. Kamick. Kamick votes no. Obernolte. Obernolte votes no. Pallone. Pallone votes aye. Eschew. Eschew votes aye. Degette. Degette votes aye. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes aye. Matsui. Matsui votes aye. Castor. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes.
Aye.
Sarbanes votes aye. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Clark. Clark votes aye. Cardenas. Cardenas votes aye. Ruiz. Ruiz votes aye. Peters. Peters votes aye. Dingell. Dingell votes aye. VC. VC votes aye. Custer. Kelly. Kelly votes aye. Barragan. Barragan votes aye. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes aye. Soto. Soto votes aye. Craig. Craig votes aye. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Trahan votes aye. Fletcher. Rogers. Rogers votes no. Mr. Johnson is not recorded. Johnson votes no.
Any other members not recorded?
Mr. Weber is not recorded. Weber votes no.
Any other members unrecorded? How's Mr. Fulcher recorded?
Mr. Fulcher is not recorded. Fulcher votes no.
Any other members unrecorded? Clerk will report the tally.
Chair Duncan, on that vote, there were 21 ayes and 24 noes.
The amendment is not agreed to. Are there any other amendments to be offered? Seeing none, we'll proceed to the bill as not amended, and roll call has been requested, so the clerk will call the roll. This is on passage of the bill.
Burgess. Burgess votes aye. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson. Bouchon. Bouchon votes aye. Hudson. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Palmer votes aye. Dunn. Curtis. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Crenshaw votes aye. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Armstrong. Armstrong votes aye. Weber. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Fulcher votes aye. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes aye. Miller Meeks. Kamick. Kamick votes aye. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone. Pallone votes no. Eschew. Eschew votes no. Deget. Deget votes no. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes no. Matsui. Matsui votes no. Castor. Castor votes no. Sarbanes. Sarbanes votes no. Tonko.
No.
Tonko votes no. Clark. No. Clark votes no. Cardenas. No. Cardenas votes no. Ruiz. No. Ruiz votes no. Peters. Peters votes no. Dingell. Dingell votes no. VC. VC votes no. Custer. Kelly. Kelly votes no. Barragan. Barragan votes no. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes no. Soto. Soto votes no. Craig. No. Craig votes no. Schreier. Schreier votes no. Trahan. Trahan votes no. Fletcher. Rogers. Rogers votes aye.
Are there any members unrecorded? How's Mr. Carter reported?
Carter's not recorded. Carter votes aye.
How's Mr. Johnson recorded?
Johnson is not recorded. Johnson votes aye.
Any other members unrecorded? Seeing none, the clerk will report the roll call.
Chair Duncan, on that vote, there were 24 ayes and 21 noes.
The ayes have it, and the bill is adopted. Chair will now call up HR 6421. Ask the clerk to report.
H.R. 6421, a bill to prohibit the Secretary of Energy from enforcing energy-efficient standards applicable to manufactured housing and for other purposes.
Without objection, the first reading of the bill is dispensed with. The bill would be open for amendment anytime so ordered. Does anyone seek to be recognized on the bill? For what purpose does Dr. Bashan seek recognition?
I want to speak on the underlying legislation.
Gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Mr. Speaker, the Affordable Housing over Mandated Efficiency Standards, or HOMES Act, will end the regulatory conflict between the Department of Energy and the Department of Housing and Urban Development regarding energy efficiency standards for manufactured housing. These homes provide low-cost housing to over 22 million Americans and account for approximately 11% of new single-family home starts. Manufactured housing is critically important throughout rural America, and specifically in my district in Southwest and West Central Indiana, where we've seen a housing affordability gap and severe housing cost burdens leading to a shortage of housing. This is not unique to my district. This is across America. There is an existing regulatory framework at HUD that addresses both construction, installation, as well as testing, compliance, and enforcement standards in a way that balances the goals of safety, efficiency, and cost to millions of American households seeking access to the affordable housing option that manufactured homes represent. HUD is the correct agency to oversee efficiency regulation on manufactured homes, not DOE. I urge my colleagues to support the Affordable Homes Act, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Anyone else seek recognition to speak on the bill? Mr. Getz, recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So the first thing I'd like to do is channel my mentor, John Dingell, because I would think that as the Energy and Commerce Committee, we would be interested in protecting our jurisdiction and protecting DOE's authority to issue energy conservation standards. If this bill becomes law, DOE, under this committee's jurisdiction, will lose its authority to issue efficiency standards for manufactured housing. So let me clarify. The agency with energy subject matter experience will lose its authority to issue energy efficiency standards for manufactured housing. That would be moved to another agency. As the ranking member of the Energy, Climate, and Grid Security Subcommittee, I can't support legislation that strips DOE of its authorities and moves an important efficiency issue to the jurisdiction of another agency and another committee. I trust DOE and its subject matter experts to carry out realistic energy efficiency standards that are good for the environment and good for consumers. Also, this bill came to our subcommittee and now to the full committee without a hearing. So what that means is we haven't had a chance to assess the impacts of this bill on the many American families that live in these houses and would be affected by preventing DOE from implementing its energy conservation standards for manufactured housing. I would note that the types of people who buy these types of homes are lower income people who already pay a higher percentage of their income for their utilities. And if the result of this bill was that energy efficiency standards were undermined for people in these homes, then they would have to pay even more. And I think that's just unfair, but if we lose our jurisdiction, then we'll have no idea if that happened or not. So I always hate to oppose my dear friend, Mr. Bouchon, but I cannot support this bill, and I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Anyone else seeking recognition on the bill? Seeing none, are there any amendments to be offered? Seeing no amendments, the clerk will call the roll for a roll call vote on passage of the bill.
Burgess. Burgess votes aye. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson.
I did it last year, and I said,
Bouchon. Bouchon votes aye. Hudson. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Carter votes aye. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Palmer votes aye. Dunn. Curtis. Lesko. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Crenshaw votes aye. Joyce. Joyce votes aye. Armstrong. Armstrong votes aye. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Harshbarger votes aye. Miller Meeks. Kamek. Kamek votes aye. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone. Pallone votes no. Eschew. Eschew votes no. Deget. Deget votes no. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes no. Matsui. Matsui votes no. Castor. Castor votes no. Sarbanes. Sarbanes votes no. Tonko.
no.
Tonko votes no. Clark. Clark votes no. Cardenas. Cardenas votes no. Ruiz. Ruiz votes no. Peters. Peters votes no. Dingell. Dingell votes no. Vesey. Vesey votes no. Custer. Kelly. Kelly votes no. Badagan. Badagan votes no. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes no. Soto. Soto votes no. Craig. Schreier. Schreier votes no. Trahan. Trahan votes no. Fletcher. Rogers. Rogers votes aye.
Are there any members unrecorded? How's Ms. Lesko?
Lesko is not recorded. Lesko votes aye.
How's Mr. Fulcher recorded?
Mr. Fulcher is not recorded. Fulcher votes aye.
Any other members unrecorded? Seeing none, the clerk will report the tally.
Joyce is recorded as aye.
Clerk will report.
Chair Duncan, on that vote, there were 24 ayes and 20 noes.
The ayes have it, and H.R. 6421 is adopted. All right, our plan is to call up this next bill and then recess until tomorrow, I believe. So the chair will now, Merry Christmas, right? Chair will call up H.R. 6572 and ask clerk to report.
H.R. 6572, a bill to direct the Secretary of Commerce to take actions necessary and appropriate to promote the competitiveness of the United States related to the deployment, use, application, and competitiveness of blockchain technology or other distributed ledger technology, and for other purposes.
Without objection, first reading of the bill is dispensed with. The bill will be open for amendment any time, so ordered. Does anyone seek recognition on the bill? Mr. Bouchon's recognized.
Sorry, Mr. Chair, my paperwork was in the wrong order. I have an amendment at the desk.
Clerk will report the amendment.
Amendment in the nature of a substitute to H.R. 6572, offered by Mr. Bouchon. Strike all after the enacting clause and insert the following. Section 1, short title. This act may be cited as the Deploying American Blockchains Act of 2023.
Without objection, further reading of the amendments dispensed with. Dr. Bouchon's recognized to explain the amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I will speak in favor of my amendment. I thank the committee for considering another bipartisan bill that I introduced alongside Representative Lisa Blunt Rochester, which will promote American innovation and help develop uses of blockchains and distributed ledger technologies throughout the U.S. economy. Americans have led in deploying blockchains in public and private sector areas, ranging from ensuring the traceability of drugs to managing supply chains for manufacturers. Unfortunately, in recent years, our leadership position has seriously diminished as other countries see and embraced the promise that blockchains hold. According to the 2020 developer report from Electric Capital, the United States is at serious risk of losing its global leadership in blockchain. The report states that in 2015, 40% of blockchain developers were based in the United States. In 2022, that number is just 29%. Every year, the United States loses 2% of our market share. The United States benefited greatly from our leadership in the development and deployment of the internet, and we shouldn't let this opportunity pass us by. The Deploying American Blockchains Act requires the Secretary of Commerce to take a leadership role in promoting the competitiveness of the United States in the deployment, use, and application of blockchains. This bill will also establish both a blockchain promotion program and an advisory committee within the Department of Commerce to push the federal government to recapture our technological leadership. Instead of pushing American innovators abroad, the Department of Commerce needs to ensure American innovators build their companies and products in America. I urge my colleagues to support this amendment in the nature of a substitute that makes technical corrections to the base text as well as the underlying bill. Thank you. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Any further discussion on the amendment nature of substitute? Ms. Blunt-Rochester is recognized.
Mr. Chairman, I move to strike the last word.
Gentlelady is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm proud of reaching a bipartisan agreement with Mr. Bouchon on this blockchain legislation. Blockchain, also known as distributed ledger technology, allows for complex processes to occur without the need for expensive and centralized equipment. Because blockchain is decentralized, it offers both business and consumers a promising solution to some of the tech anxieties facing Americans today. Blockchain could allow consumers to see firsthand how their data is being used. Blockchain offers potentially powerful cybersecurity solutions, as its distributed nature means fraudsters could be required to fake and manipulate data with a majority of the blockchain network. The potential scalability of the technology without relying on the costly and cumbersome infrastructure of traditional information technology could lead to new small business opportunities and greater competition in the tech sector. These promising applications of blockchain may not materialize if we do not adopt smart policy. What businesses need right now is leadership from the U.S. government to ensure America is writing the rules of the road and setting the right course for the adoption of this technology. Our economy needs impartial experts to help demystify blockchain, map out its risks along with its benefits, and provide informed guidelines to the cost and benefits of using this technology. I want to thank Representative Bouchon for leading this bipartisan effort with me, and I'm pleased that this bill provides a firm foundation for U.S. blockchain policy in the United States. Thank you, and I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. Any further discussion on the Ains? Seeing none, the pending question is adoption of the amendment in nature of substitute. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed, no. Depending on the chair, the ayes have it. The Ains is agreed to. Any further discussion on the bill or any other amendments to be offered? Seeing none, the pending question is adoption of the bill as amended with the Ains, and roll call has been requested. Clerk will call the roll.
Burgess. Burgess votes aye. Latta. Latta votes aye. Guthrie. Guthrie votes aye. Griffith. Griffith votes aye. Bilirakis. Bilirakis votes aye. Johnson. Bouchon. Bouchon votes aye. Hudson. Wahlberg. Wahlberg votes aye. Carter. Carter votes aye. Duncan. Duncan votes aye. Palmer. Dunn. Curtis. Lesko. Lesko votes aye. Pence. Pence votes aye. Crenshaw. Crenshaw votes aye. Joyce. Armstrong. Armstrong votes aye. Weber. Weber votes aye. Allen. Allen votes aye. Balderson. Balderson votes aye. Fulcher. Pfluger. Pfluger votes aye. Harshbarger. Miller Meeks. Kamick. Kamick votes aye. Obernolte. Obernolte votes aye. Pallone. Pallone votes aye. Eschew. Eschew votes aye. Deget. Deget votes aye. Schakowsky. Schakowsky votes aye. Matsui. Matsui votes aye. Castor. Castor votes aye. Sarbanes. Sarbanes votes aye. Tonko.
Aye.
Tonko votes aye. Clark. Clark votes aye. Cardenas. Cardenas votes aye. Ruiz. Ruiz votes aye. Peters. Peters votes aye. Dingell. Dingell votes aye. VC. VC votes aye. Custer. Kelly. Kelly votes aye. Barragan. Barragan votes aye. Blunt Rochester. Blunt Rochester votes aye. Soto. Soto votes aye. Craig. Craig votes aye. Schreier. Schreier votes aye. Trahan. Trahan votes aye. Fletcher. Rogers. Rogers votes aye.
Any member unrecorded? How's Mr. Joyce recorded?
Joyce is not recorded. Joyce votes aye.
How's Mr. Palmer recorded?
Palmer is not recorded. Palmer votes aye.
How's Ms. Harshbarger recorded?
Harshbarger is not recorded. Harshbarger votes aye.
How's Ms. Miller Meeks recorded?
Miller Meeks is not recorded. Miller Meeks votes aye.
Any other member unrecorded?
Fulcher votes aye.
Seeing none, the clerk will report the tally. Report the tally.
Chair Duncan, on that vote, there were 46 ayes and 0 noes.
The ayes have it. The bill is adopted. All right, so where we are, we're at stopping point, and we're going to take up H.R. 6571 as the next bill tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock. And with that, the committee will stand in recess.